Denny Hamlin says that 23XI Racing has a car ready for Carl Edwards if he ever decides to return, and Carson Kvapil will join Junior Motorsports full-time in 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2024 Rush Truck Center's throwback scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega. This is a throwback to Tony Stewart's 2013 Bass Pro Shop scheme. This one looks amazing. They did a fantastic job. One of the best throwbacks I've seen so far this year. Looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Noah Gragson's 2024 Beefaroo scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega. Honestly, the scheme's not that great in my opinion, if I'm going to be real. I don't like the color. It doesn't look fantastic. It's cool to see he's got a new sponsor for the weekend, but it doesn't look the greatest in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' 2024 Family Dollar paint scheme that we'll see next weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I think this looks absolutely amazing. I think Legacy's has some not so great schemes, but this is definitely one of the better schemes I've seen so far in 2024. It looks solid. We're looking forward to see on the racetrack next weekend at the Charlotte Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 Tootsie scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega. I like the Neon Peak. Kyle Sykes absolutely designed a beautiful masterclass scheme. It looks incredible, and I'm looking forward to see on the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Preece's 2024 Wonder Bread scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega. The Wonder Bread car is back. This homage to Talladega Nights. This looks absolutely amazing. It looks great. It looks incredible. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2024 FedEx One race scheme that we'll see this weekend at Talladega. Scheme's all right in my opinion. I do like the colors. I do like the other colors they've got in it. It's solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing the racetrack this weekend at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Craig Morgan. As there was a report on Monday by Bob Pockers that Craig Morgan will perform the national anthem this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. Craig Morgan was a big country singer back in the 2000s, releasing songs like That's What I Like About Sunday, and of course songs like Bonfire. I think Craig will do a fantastic job doing the national anthem, and it's pretty cool to see that he in fact will be able to do the national anthem. It's pretty exciting stuff. In my honest opinion, really cool stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 23XI Racing. As 23XI Racing released a tweet on Monday confirming that they are going to be donating $1 million to hurricane relief. If you've seen across the country, many people in the NASCAR industry and people we know around here have been showing their support in helping with the hurricane relief. And it's been amazing to see all the people helping. Greg Biffle been flying in supplies. Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick Motorsports, Carl Edwards, Clayton McFarland's been helping out with the hurricane relief. And it's not just people in NASCAR, but a lot of country music singers, a lot of NFL players have been helping out with hurricane relief as well. It's amazing to see, and it's really, and Joey Logano think doing like $250,000 if I'm not mistaken too. So it's really awesome stuff and amazing to see that everyone has support and the community's working together to help. And it's amazing stuff and really great to see overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about some aero changes for Talladega. As it was confirmed yesterday, there's some new aero changes that are going to be coming for Talladega this weekend. There's going to be a fabric added to the roof flap on top of the race car. There's the rocker panel has actually been extended to the bottom. I think there's another part on the roof rail that's been extended 2 inches. This is in hope to prevent cars flipping upside down at super speedway races and at other tracks that we see higher speeds. We have seen a lot of flips with the next-gen car in the last couple weeks. At Daytona, Josh Berry flipped upside down. Michael McDowell nearly flipped upside down at Daytona earlier this year as well. And then Corey LaJoie, of course, flipped upside down. The hope is with some of these changes that air can't get below the car, having the rocker panel extended, I think is a really good decision in my honest opinion. And I think it's also another good decision to go ahead and try to reduce the takeoff speed, or basically increase the takeoff speed that you're going to need for these cars to flip upside down. Granted, if you got a lot of air under the car when it goes really quick, it's going to help. Now, having that rocker panel stand, I think, is one of the best decisions that NASCAR has made overall. I think it's a fantastic change and a great decision, and I'm glad to see they're making some aero changes to try to really really help out with a lot of the issues with the next-gen car, because with the underbody, it's a flat underbody. So that is causing some of the major issues and a lot of the major problems. So I'm really glad to see they're doing this, and I think it's a fantastic decision and fantastic change overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Danny Bohn. As it was announced on Monday that Danny Bohn will drive the 44 for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Talladega. Danny Bohn has not made a start in the Truck Series, I believe, since 2021 or 2022. He's been racing in modifieds over the course of the last 10 years or something like that, and he's had some success, I think, on the modified trail as well. Now, this is a really good opportunity for Danny, one of the best opportunities I think he's ever had in his Truck Series career. Nice Motorsports builds some pretty fast trucks, and I think especially if he can be up front in contention at the end of the day, I think he's going to have a really good chance and opportunity to go to victory lane. So this is a great opportunity for Danny. I think ultimately if he can just survive the wrecks and carnage, because the Truck Series might be carnage fest, even though they are going to have the race potentially shortened, considering time limit might come into play on Friday night. But I think this is a great opportunity, and glad to see he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive for Nice Motorsports this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Renault. As it was reported on Monday by Motorsports.com that Renault will be ending their engine program after 2025, and they'll be switching to Mercedes custom engines starting in 2026. Renault has been struggling with their engine program. They originally, basically, Andretti was going to come in and basically work with Renault starting for 2026, but obviously Andretti has not been approved to come into Formula One at this point. So I think that's one of the big reasons why they're abandoning their engine program after 2025. And it's also no secret that the Mercedes powertrain has shown a lot more speed as of recently. Lewis Hamilton and George Russell have won races this year, and also, of course, Lando Norris has a really good chance and opportunity to win his first ever Formula One championship and his 2 career Formula One wins up to this point. And Oscar Piastri also has 2 wins so far this season. So I think they look at the success of Mercedes and the Mercedes powertrain recently, and I think they want to switch to get that speed and show more pace. I think it's a great decision on their part. It sucks to see they are abandoning that engine program they've had, but at the same token, same time, if it can lead to more success going forward, I think it'll make a lot of people happy that are watching. So really good decision for them. It sucks to see they're abandoning that engine program, but because Andretti's not coming in, they're not going to have that engine program for 2026, and they'll switch to Mercedes for the 2026 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dean Thompson. As it was announced on Monday that Dean Thompson will drive the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing this weekend at Talladega. This will be Dean Thompson's second career NASCAR Xfinity start, as he ran to Charlotte earlier this year, and did show some solid pace and speed, where I think he had a top 10 or top 15 car a lot of the day. Now, Dean Thompson, of course, will do double duty, as he'll, of course, drive the 5-truck, 4-Trigon Garage, and the sponsorship Thompson Pipe Group, which is his family's company, will sponsor him in this event as well. It's a really good opportunity for Dean. Sam Hunt Racing has shown some good pace and speed so far this year, and I think Dean could have a really solid chance and opportunity to be very competitive this weekend at Talladega. Even though Toyotas are a little bit down on numbers going into the weekend for Xfinity and Cup as well, I think it's a great opportunity for Dean, and I think he'll do a really good job, and I think he'll have a good chance and opportunity for sure to be very competitive in the 26 car this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ryan Reed. As it was shockingly announced on Monday that Ryan Reed will drive the 91 for McAnally-Hilgeman Racing this weekend at Talladega. Ryan Reed has made select starts in the Truck Series over the course of last year's. I think his last start coming in 2021 when he drove the 45 truck for Nice Motorsports. But Ryan Reed is going to have the best opportunity he's had since he drove for Roush in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. McAnally-Hilgeman Racing has been really strong this year. They're contending for a championship, and the 91 truck, while it's not won a race so far, we've seen Corey Day show some good pace in that truck, and we've also seen, of course, drivers like Zane Smith and Jack Wood at times show speed throughout the season. I think Ryan Reed is a really good talent on super speedways, and I would put some money on him this weekend if you're putting betting odds, because I think he could have a chance and a really good opportunity to maybe contend for the win and victory. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see if he is competitive this weekend, but I think we'll have a really good chance and strong opportunity to contend, as McAnally-Hilgeman has shown pace and speed. I think Christian Eckes is probably still the favorite for the weekend, but I think he's going to do a really solid and fantastic job with McAnally this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dylan Lupton. As it was announced yesterday that Dylan Lupton will drive the 15 for AM Racing for the final 6 races of 2024. Dylan Lupton has made select starts in NASCAR over the course of the last few years. I think he drove the 30 truck for On Point last year. At one point, it also, I think, made some select starts with Sam Hunt Racing over the course of the last few years. Now, Dylan isn't the greatest driver in the world. I'm going to be perfectly honest. He's driven for teams like JGL, and I think he got an opportunity at one point to drive for Joe Gibbs Racing. That might have been Dakota Armstrong. But this is going to be an okay opportunity, but I think we all know that AM Racing has struggled a lot this year with drivers like Haley Deegan and Josh Berry and Joey Logano, who has gotten a couple top 10s for the team. This team has generally struggled. Now, having someone in the car for the final 6 races, that is a good decision in my opinion, not just having different drivers get behind the wheel. And obviously, you can't get Cup Series drivers behind the wheel because Cup drivers are not allowed to run the final 7 races of the year with the playoffs. So you have to get someone who's going to bring a little sponsorship and funding, which is why they've chosen Dylan Lupton for the seat, because I think Dylan is bringing a little bit of funding and sponsorship for this weekend. I hope the cars can stay under him, and I hope he can do a really good job. I'm not expecting him, unfortunately, to set the world on fire, but I really hope he can have a strong and good run with AM Racing and the 15 team for the rest of the season. Hope he can get some top 20s, and maybe they can help with the owners' points so they're not failing to make races like when we go to the Roval, where there are going to be some drivers that probably will be running this race at the Roval later this season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. We had a couple SVG stories to talk about in today's episode. The first one is he actually released a video last night, thanking everyone for a great year number 1. He's thanked everybody for the support throughout the first year of being in NASCAR, and he said he's had a lot of fun so far in year number 1. I've talked a lot about Shane Van Gisbergen on this channel because Shane in year number 1 has been absolutely impressive. Of course, he won the Chicago Street Course last year in his NASCAR Cup Series debut. But so far this year for Shane, he's got 3 wins in the 2024 season in Xfinity, which is the most we've seen anyone have outside of Austin Hill. And he's been really dominant on the road course, with the only road course race he's not really had a chance and opportunity to win being at Watkins Glen, where he still finished inside the top 5 and had a really good day. He also had a chance and opportunity Watkins Glen a couple weeks ago in the NASCAR Cup Series, finishing in second place to Chris Buescher, where he got outdueled at the end of the event. But SVG has been super impressive throughout this year. He's got a lot of top 5s, a lot of top 10s. I think he's had 9 top 10s so far this year in Xfinity, and he's improved on those drastically throughout the year. And this is with the Colleague Racing organization that I think is no secret. They have struggled. Yes, they've hired Ty Norris very recently, but I think they've struggled overall immensely over the course of the last year or so. And I think going into next year, he'll probably make some select Xfinity starts, maybe with Junior Motorsports. They bring the 9 car back, which we'll talk about that here near the end of the episode. But I think SVG has done a really solid job this year, and he's been very impressive in his growth. Even Ricky Rudd said on PRN yesterday that he's been very impressed with Shane's growth and development this year. And having someone like Ricky Rudd, who's a NASCAR Hall of Famer, say that really shows how much support people have for him. So I think it's really good to see the support that he's getting at the moment, and I'm really glad to see that he's getting the support, and I think he's done a fantastic and great job in year number 1. I think he's going to do amazing the rest of this year, and I think he could have a chance and opportunity in the next year or so to win his first ever all race, which is one of the big goals that SVG's had in his racing career up to this point. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about William Sawash. As it was confirmed by Tricon Garage yesterday that William Sawash will drive the 1 for Tricon Garage this weekend at Talladega Superspeedway. Now, a lot of people are wondering, why is William racing at Talladega? Was this race originally announced? No, but they're giving him an extra race because he will turn 18 this week. And to run on superspeedway tracks in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series or any of the top 3 divisions, you have to be 18 years old. Now, William, of course, won't be, ARCA's not running at Talladega, so he won't really have any prior experience going to weekend, even though he does have some of the experience on the intermediates at this point and tracks like Nashville, for example. And I think William has been solid in the Truck Series this year at times, but when Connor Zilch got behind the wheel, I think Connor's actually been a little bit better in the Truck Series this year. though I will say William has showed some good speed at tracks like IRP and Bristol throughout this year. And Tricon Garage, to be fair, on their Super Speedway program, it's actually been really good throughout the year. So I do think that William is going to have a chance and opportunity for sure to be very, very competitive this weekend if he's up front by the end of the race. And maybe you never know, he might get his first career Truck Series win because he's still looking for that first truck win up to this point. But also remember, in the next couple weeks, he will make his Xfinity Series debut at Homestead Miami Speedway, where I think with the speed that JGR has shown on the bigger ovals, he's probably going to have a chance and opportunity to be very, very competitive. So I'm really excited for him. It's a great opportunity for him, and I hope he can do a fantastic job and show a lot of people that he can be a good Super Speedway racer. We'll see what he can do, and we'll see if he can for sure be very, very competitive this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about officiating. Now, I didn't talk about this on the channel too much, but if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race at Kansas Speedway, there was an incident on lap number 1 where Ty Dillon went up the racetrack, Chase Elliott made it 4 wide, and Josh Berry got clipped in that. Now, Josh Berry really didn't have any damage on his race car, but NASCAR, for whatever reason, towed his car back to the infield, and all Ronnie Childers basically was wanting, and Josh were wanting, where they were wanting 4 fresh tires and a chance and opportunity to get back into the race. Well, they were towed to the campground, and Ronnie Childers put out a very, very angry tweet right during the race, basically saying, in the 25 years I've been in the NASCAR Cup Series, this is one of the most dumbest things and screwed up things I've been a part of in my whole entire professional career. Now, Brad Moran went on SiriusXM NASCAR radio and basically said that they're not planning to change anything in regards to this for the rest of this year. However, they are going to examine it during the offseason and probably make some changes in 2025. I really don't understand why they can't enact rules when it comes to the damaged vehicle policy now. Because at some point, a championship contender is going to get eliminated because of this tow rule. This is something that happened to Ryan Blaney where they didn't really get a chance and opportunity to basically fix the car. And in this case and situation, Josh Berry wasn't the one who caused the incident wreck. Now, maybe the only thing they could say was, well, qualify better so you don't get involved in incidents like this. But you can't control when someone wrecks in front of you, especially considering it's lap number 1 of a race. And I feel like that NASCAR, they've done this before where they've dragged cars back to pit road and let teams change the tires, and they've given them the time and opportunity. I feel like that, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the damaged vehicle policy, I think you should get one chance and opportunity to be able to go back to the garage. If you go to the garage, you should not be instantly eliminated, especially if your car is really not damaged. And the fact they towed Josh Berry to the campground, I think it's just a little more ridiculous in my opinion, because towing him back to the campground, he wasn't able to get that chance and opportunity to work on the car. And I really hope, like I said, they could change the DVP policy going into next year. I wish they could do it now, but if they can do it at some point, it is what it is. At least it sounds like they're looking to do it at this point, and they need to do something about this because it's a damaged vehicle policy. It's really stupid in my opinion, and I think there need to be massive and crucial changes with it because overall, in my opinion, I'm not the biggest fan of the DVP, and I personally think it needs to change overall. Let's say a guy like Kyle Larson gets affected, or let's say Tyler Reddick, or championship contenders get affected, or like, for instance, in a race like Kyle Busch gets affected, or somebody like that, or Ross Chastain, for example. I think it would be stupid if those guys were competing for a championship, and I think that is going to happen at some point unless these rule changes, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen once again. As it was confirmed that Shane Van Gisbergen will be doing double duty this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. He'll drive the 16 car for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series and of course drive the number 97 for Kaulig Racing with WeatherTech sponsoring. Now this is a race that SVG had scheduled for this year, so he originally, before they added more races with the safety culture sponsorship and the other sponsorship that he's been having, but obviously he's making a lot of starts near the end of this year to get prepared for 2025 because of course to move up to the NASCAR Cup Series full time. Now, SVG has had some bad luck on super speedways on the Xfinity side and the Cup side. While he did have a chance to win at Atlanta where he finished in third, he of course did get a top 15 in the first race at Daytona where he finished 11th, nearly getting a top 10 in his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut. But he had fuel mileage issues in the Xfinity Series race at Talladega earlier in the year and had an engine failure at Daytona earlier this year in the Cup Series during the second to last race of the regular season. Now, Trackhouse is repairing that number 16 car, to my understanding, because Trackhouse has been repairing his cars on the Cup side, which is why he's had speed on the Cup side compared to basically AJ Allmendinger, who of course will drive the 13 car this weekend. I think he's got a chance and opportunity if he can work with his teammates in the Chevy camp. The Chevys are going to have to work really, really well with the Toyotas if they're going to have a chance and opportunity to win. But getting the chance to do double duty and get that experience behind the wheel, I think is really going to help Shane in a pretty massive and major way. And I do expect that Shane is going to be super fast and very, very competitive. So I'm excited to see what he can do this weekend. I think he's going to be really strong and quick, and I think he'll do a really excellent and a fantastic job for sure this weekend at Talladega. I think he'll be pretty quick in both races. The call cars usually qualify pretty well on Xfinity side, so if he can qualify inside the top 10, he could have a chance to win the pole, which would be his first oval pole if he can get it done this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Oscar Piastri. Now, this is a story that kind of blew up over the weekend, but someone who is a big Oscar Piastri fan put out a tweet in regards to Oscar Piastri. We all know that there's a lot of interest around Kyle Larson, and him, people would like to see, considering Kyle Larson says he is the greatest driver in the world. That's what he says, and he's better than Max Verstappen. Kyle Larson, a lot of people want to see him get a chance to drive a Formula One car. And Kyle Larson has expressed interest in maybe doing a practice session or even a driver swap. Well, according to what Zach Brown, who of course is on Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast, Zach says that Oscar Piastri has expressed interest in racing in NASCAR, and he'd be down to maybe do a driver swap or practice session on the NASCAR side and give Kyle Larson an opportunity to practice on the Formula One side. Now, Oscar Piastri, who I've talked about already, has had a very solid year in 2024 in Formula One. And a lot of people wanting to see a driver swap for a long time. The last time I can remember a driver swap happening between a NASCAR driver and an F1 driver was when Tony Stewart and Lewis Hamilton did a driver swap back in 2011 because of the Mobil 1 entitlement and the sponsorship there. And I think it'd be pretty awesome and amazing to see Oscar Piastri and Kyle Larson get the chance to swap rides for basically a weekend at some point, like at Circuit Americas, for example, if that could ever happen, or Oscar comes and races in NASCAR. And we've seen some drivers in the Formula One world express interest in come race in NASCAR. Drivers like Jenson Button, who of course won a Formula One championship in 2009, came over, raced a few races with teams like Ricker Racing. Other drivers, of course, like Kimi Räikkönen made a few starts. And I think having more of that crossover would be really, really huge. And you put Kyle Larson in open test, for example, and he's very competitive in the McLaren, considering the McLarens have been super quick and fast. I think he could be very, very strong. The most likely thing that probably would happen is something like that happened between Jimmy Johnson and Fernando Alonso back in 2018 when he did a driver swap after the season had concluded in Bahrain. I think it'd be pretty cool to see something like this happen where Kyle Larson would get the chance and opportunity to drive a Formula One car. Kyle Larson, there is no doubt, is one of the greatest drivers in the world. He's won a lot of dirt races, 28 NASCAR Cup Series wins, led over 9,000 laps in Cup competition, and Kyle Larson's probably going to win a lot more races in NASCAR and has been super competitive in other forms of racing that he has raced in. So I think it'd be pretty awesome for something like this to happen, and I can't wait to see this happen in the future, as I do think it's something that will happen in all honesty, and I think it'd be pretty cool if something like that could happen where Kyle Larson got the chance and opportunity to race on the F1 grid at some point in the future, even though he needs super license points for that to happen. Maybe Oscar Piastri can come over and race in NASCAR maybe in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen once again. Now, there was a Reddit post that came out a couple days ago from someone talking about Shane Van Gisbergen once again. And Shane Van Gisbergen said this from, I think, a Motorsports.com article. He says the playoff format is very complicated, one of the most complicated formats that we currently have at the moment in regards to motorsports. But there is a little added context that that post did not bring up. He says it's still really fun and really great, and he's absolutely enjoyed it. Now, obviously, SVG is not wrong when it comes to the playoff format being very complicated, especially for someone that is not used to something like this. A lot of new fans that come into the sport, they find out a very difficult way and they kind of experience it for the first time. And a lot of times when it comes to the playoff format, they get extremely confused. I feel like we should, in the future, when it comes to the NASCAR playoffs, I feel like we should streamline it a little bit. Number one, I think winning you're in personally needs to go. I'm not a big fan of the winning you're in system. I don't think a win should lock you into the playoffs. I personally think if we're going to have 16 drivers get in, it should be the top 16 drivers in the points. And by the way, Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, Bubba Wallace, and I believe Kyle Busch, all four of those guys would have made the playoffs this year over drivers like Chase Briscoe, for example, and of course Austin Cindric and Daniel Suarez and Harrison Burton. Now, to be fair, Briscoe, Cindric, and Suarez did make the round of 12, which is very impressive for those drivers because two of those drivers I did not have going to the round of 12. But I feel like a win should not automatically grant you a spot into the NASCAR playoffs. I think there absolutely need to be streamlining this stuff going forward, and I feel like the one race championship is also really, really stupid. I've been against the one race system. I think we should go back to the original chase format at this point, where basically you have maybe 12 guys get in, streamline a little bit so you have big names missing. Yes, I know teams would be disappointed that they would get in. I watch NASCAR just expand it at this point, how many guys get in. But I personally do think that they need to streamline the system. But at least SVG thinks it's fun, but I do agree that it is super complicated, especially for someone who's not used to something like this. It took me a little bit of time to get used to it as well. And I do think they need to streamline the playoff format so it's not super complicated. I do think it's pretty complicated in some ways, and I do think personally they need to streamline it a little bit when it comes to the complications of this. To be perfectly honest, I really hope they do in the future go back to a different system. I know we've had the same system for a while at this point, have the stage points and all the playoff points and all that stuff, but personally a win should not lock your way into the playoffs, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hailie Deegan. As it was reported by the feeder series that IndyCar has, that Hailie Deegan will make her open wheel debut very soon in Formula 4 at Circuit of the Americas with her teammate, with I think Toby Gould's or Motorsports organization. Hailie Deegan has been teasing some potential possibilities of going to IndyCar over the last few months. It was reported by multiple sources, including David Land, that she had been spotted in the IndyCar paddock, and there are rumors that she was potentially going to do an embrace in Indy NXT in 2025. Now, it's unknown at this point if that is still happening at this particular moment, but it could still end up happening. Now, obviously, Hailie Deegan was racing full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year with AM Racing, but was let go not too long ago, right before the Chicago weekend, as unfortunately, she had been struggling immensely this year. They had fired her crew chief, Joe Williams, who is now working at RSS Racing, crew chief in the 28 car for the RSS Racing organization. And I think that since then, they were really, really struggling. And since that point, AM Racing, though they've had a couple good runs with Joey Logano, for the most part, they have been struggling this year to make races, and they barely made the race at Watkins Glen by like 31,000 of a second with a two-time NASCAR Cup champion, one of the most successful drivers in the Xfinity Series as well. Now, how do I think Hailie Deegan is going to do? I really don't know at this point, to be honest with you. But I'm glad to see that she has found something. She's also, I think, competing in Nitrocross coming up in the next few weeks. So at least she's finding something to race. She's been doing some sprint car racing, some of the, I think, other forms of racing at like Millbridge as well. And I'm glad to see that she's finding something that she can do. And hey, if she can be very successful at open wheel, that'd be really great. Now, do I think Hailie Deegan is ever going to come back to NASCAR? Maybe. There certainly is a possibility and chance that she could come back. But if she succeeds in open wheel and is competitive as Circuit America's coming up here, I could see her sticking around in the IndyCar world and not coming back to NASCAR. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. If she can be successful in a motorsport, because she was a very successful stadium super truck driver, and she's been really successful in the off-road scene, if she can be very, very successful in other forms of racing, that would make me happy, and I want her to succeed. I think it'd be really good for motorsports across the board. She's got a big social media presence, and I think that, of course, she can succeed if she wanted to just do that. But she's a racer at heart, and if she can find something that she can be very successful at, I think that would be great for everybody involved. Now, I would love to see her come back and race in NASCAR, but if she decides to not come back and race in NASCAR and be successful in open wheel, that's all that matters to me. I hope she can be successful, and I hope she can run very, very well on the open wheel side. We'll see what ends up happening, see how she ends up doing, but I'm glad to see that she at least has found something to do and go and race, and hopefully, like I said, she can be very successful in what other forms of racing she races in 2025. I think she will make a NASCAR start at some point in 2025 probably, but at least she'll be competing in the open wheel scene, at least for some races in 2024. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR 25. Now, Monday, if you were on social media, you saw Steve Myers, who is the president of iRacing, put out some very interesting teasers in regards to NASCAR 25. He talked a lot about the game, saying that he was racing at a couple different tracks with AI, at tracks like Atlanta and Bristol, and I think he mentioned Darlington as well. And he basically said as well that if you like the World of Outlaws physics, you're really going to like this game in a pretty major way. He also kind of confirmed where he kind of walked and tracked back when he was talking to Elite Precision on Twitter. He kind of walked this back, but he also may have kind of confirmed that the NASCAR Xfinity Series may also end up being in NASCAR 25 next year. While we do not know official date at this current moment, we don't know exactly when the game is going to be released. It is rumored that the game will be coming out in quarter number 4 of 2025 and is not expected to be delayed, even though GTA 6 has rumored to be delayed. That's a game that we don't know at this point is going to be coming out. We know NASCAR 25 is coming out in late 2025. First of all, a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people talk about the World of Outlaws, and some are kind of worried that the Unity engine might be coming into play. They're not using the Unity engine, they're using the Unreal engine, which is going to provide some better graphics. And the AI and all that other stuff, and graphics shouldn't be the most important thing. Yes, you want a game to look really, really good, but you got to have a game that's going to play really good, especially since you're going to have 39 other drivers on the racetrack at once. You can make the graphics look so good, but if the game isn't good, people are not going to enjoy and play it. But hearing that they're doing a lot of big things with this game, and Steve Myers, I trust a lot when it comes to this kind of stuff, because Steve Myers absolutely knows what he's doing. He's designed iRacing for a long time, and iRacing is a massive and major service. But you can't make the game a complete simulation because you want younger fans to be able to play the game and come into it. And that's what NASCAR's after, is a younger demographic of fans to kind of try and grow the sport. And having the Xfinity Series in the game, too, I think is absolutely going to be really, really huge for NASCAR's growth as well, so people can know the drivers in Xfinity. And I'd have to imagine the Truck Series most likely is going to be in the game as well. Now, they're still working on the builds. They haven't released any screenshots at this point, but I have to imagine there's probably going to be some screenshots coming in the not-so-distant future, which I think is going to be really, really exciting in all honesty, considering the fact that I want to see the game really, really soon. I think most of you want to see the game as well come out soon. I think we got to be patient at this point to see it. I hope the game is really, really good, and I'm definitely going to be playing it for sure, but I also want to see the reviews before I go ahead and play it. Nonetheless, I think it's really exciting to see there's more coming out about NASCAR 25, and I'm excited for the future. I trust iRacing a lot more than I did the other companies. You got people from the Papyrus Studios working on this, which is great considering iRacing came from the Papyrus days. So I'm really excited for the future of NASCAR 25 especially, and I cannot wait for the game to be officially released in 2025. We'll probably get a day here really, really soon before the end of the year on exactly when the game will release, and we're probably going to be getting some trailers at some point in early 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about NASCAR Full Speed. As it was confirmed on Monday afternoon that Season 2 of NASCAR Full Speed is going to be coming in 2024, going into early 2025. It was also confirmed that NASCAR and Words and Press have formed a entertainment studio called Full Speed Entertainment, where they are going to be making documentaries, more shows like NASCAR Full Speed. There will also be new podcasts coming in as well, and I think these will all be coming out of NASCAR Studios. The guy who did all the ESPN 30 for 30, I think, is also involved in this company as well. This is absolutely huge. There's been rumors that this was going to be coming up, and they were planning and they were filming at Darlington and other races as well. Now, at this point, we don't know if 23rd Line Racing will be part of this show, considering it's still part of the charter negotiations. They're one of the two organizations that has not signed the charter agreement for 2024, and they do need to sign the charter agreement before the end of the year, or unless they're going to go to court, of course, which they only have about 3 months at this point. Though I do think 23rd Line most likely is going to sign the charter agreement for drivers like Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, even though Bubba, we know, will be back with 2311 in 2025. But I'm very excited. I watched Season 1 of NASCAR Full Speed, and the first season of NASCAR Full Speed I thought was absolutely incredible. They took the sport very, very seriously. Unlike the cruise show they did on Netflix, this show was very serious. It was kind of like Drive to Survive. And from what I understand, the viewership for this season was like 3.8 million viewers on average, which is really big for the first season. Drive to Survive did not have these kind of numbers. If they can expand on Season 2 and continue it, would be really great. I really hope we do get to see a presence of drivers like Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott a lot more. See other drivers in the field like RFK Racing drivers like Brad Keselowski, for example. Considering Brad was in the first round, have an emphasis on him. And have an emphasis on non-playoff drivers like Ross Chastain, like your Kyle Busches, like your Shane Van Gisbergens, for example. Drivers that like Bubba Wallace, well, like guys that did not make the playoffs this year. Put some emphasis on those guys as well, because I think it would be completing the show. There's probably going to be more documentaries coming out in the future as well, which I think is super exciting. I think the future is really, really bright at this point. There's a lot of positive things to come from this. I think this is super exciting, and I cannot wait for season 2 to come out. And I think it could be very, very successful for the sport as a whole. So I'm excited about this. This is amazing to see. I think it's going to be successful for Netflix as a whole, and I think grow that younger demographic that NASCAR is looking for. Again, NASCAR is trying to chase that younger demographic, and a show like this could bring a lot of younger fans in. In my honest opinion, I'm just excited about this, and I cannot wait for season 2 to come out. I don't think they confirmed a date on Monday, so I'm excited to see when they do officially release it for 2025. Really looking forward to it, and I think it's just so exciting to see that we are officially getting season 2 at full speed. I think it's really exciting and really great to see overall, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Caden Honeycutt. As it was announced yesterday morning that Caden Honeycutt will join Nice Motorsports full-time in 2025, driving a number 45 truck in 2025. Caden Honeycutt has been driving part-time for Nice Motorsports throughout the 2024 season, though he's ran a majority of races in that number 45 truck this year, and he has been super impressive this season. He could have won at Kansas earlier this year, but unfortunately had, I think, a bad pit stop near the end of the race. He had one of the fastest trucks at Charlotte Motor Speedway for, unfortunately, once again, having another flat tire. Had a fast truck in Nashville earlier this year, but unfortunately had an engine failure, and has had one of the fastest trucks throughout the year so far. He's also expected to pair up with Phil Gold for the 2025 season as well. This is also a no-brainer move. Phil Gold and Caden Honeycutt being teamed up together, this is going to be a very dynamic and really dangerous pairing going into 2025. Nice Motorsports, no secret, has really struggled in 2024. Bailey Curry's been really disappointing so far this year. It's unknown at this point if he is going to be coming back in 2025. There is a chance he could come back next year, which I think he will be better. He's just had a lot of bad luck this year so far. And then Matt Mills has been a major disappointment this year. He is confirmed to be back with Nice Motorsports. So if they're bringing Caden Honeycutt in, who is going to have the strongest Nice truck in 2025? And I expect this to be a really strong season for Caden going into this year. And this is another short track racer earning the chance and opportunity. He came from the short track scene and races very respectful and very clean on the racetrack. And someone that can also usually take care of equipment for you. I think Caden is going to have a really strong year in 2025, if I'm going to be real and honest. So what are my predictions for Caden? Well, I think he will win next year. If he doesn't win before the end of this year, I think he definitely will win at some point next year. I think he could win at least 2 or 3 for sure next year, because Caden Honeycutt has been very fast throughout the year. And I feel like this is kind of like how Carson Hocevar was. It took Carson Hocevar a little bit to get some victories with Phil Gold, but once Carson got that first win, he absolutely went on a tear and got 4 wins that same season. I expect to almost have that same kind of season in 2025. And I compare Caden Honeycutt a little bit to Ross Chastain, a driver that was kind of unknown at the time in the early 2010s, but became a really big successful driver when he got a chance and opportunity to be top-tier equipment. And look at Ross now. He's won 5 NASCAR Cup Series races and has had chances to win championships, including 2 years ago where he finished second in the championship. I see that same pathway happening for Caden, except the fact that he drives not as aggressive as Ross Chastain does. So I think going into next year, he will make the playoffs in 2025. I really believe he's going to do that because he will be working with Phil Gold, and I think that this is going to be a really strong and a very dynamic pairing going into next year. I don't think he's going to win the championship next year because Corey Haim is coming back most likely. Wayne Riggs has been on a tear, and I think he's going to be a championship contender, and other drivers like Andres Perez are potentially moving up next year to Spire Motorsports or Rev Racing. That's a rumor that I've heard recently. So I think that there is a lot of big changes coming to the truck series, but I think having Caden run full-time for the organization and team going into next year, I think is going to be a major, major success and a really huge moment for the team. So I'm really happy for Caden. I think he's earned the right and opportunity going into next year. Maybe in the future, we could see him make some Xfinity starts. He has made starts with teams like Mark Harmon, but this is going to be the best chance and opportunity. I've been wanting this kid to go full-time, and I think he's going to do a really fantastic and great job with Nice Motorsports in the 2025 NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Carson Kvapil. As it was officially announced yesterday afternoon that Carson Kvapil will join Junior Motorsports full-time in 2025, driving a number 1 car next season. Crew chiefs have not been announced for next year, though it's been rumored Andy Overstreet could be the crew chief for Carson next year. And Bass Shops is going to sponsor Carson Kvapil for 23 races in 2025, meaning Bass will be the majority sponsor for next year. And they will also sponsor Dale Jr. for 2 late model races in 2025. Last week, it was put out in a teaser video that he was likely going to be going full-time, and now it's officially confirmed. I am so happy for Carson Kvapil to get this opportunity. Carson in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year, he has been absolutely super and very, very impressive. He's been extremely competitive throughout the 2024 season. In his first 2 starts, he finished inside the top 5, had at times on the long run the fastest car at Martinsville, and was in position to win at Dover in his second start, where he finished in second position right behind Ryan Truex, and Ryan Truex beat him on the final restart. But Carson Kvapil nearly won in only his second start. And he's had some other really strong runs. Indianapolis, I think he got a top 10 or even a top 5. And there are a few other races throughout the year where Carson has been exceptionally very, very impressive. And I think this one team is going to be super, super strong going into 2025. And this is another short track racer, kind of like Caden Honeycutt, who's getting the chance and opportunity to be full-time in 2025. And I think he's going to do an exceptional job next year. He's been really good in Xfinity, and I think there's another driver in the Cars Late Model Tour. It's kind of like Josh Berry, for example, too. Josh Berry was very successful in the Cars Late Model Tour, ran full-time there for a year, and then got the chance to drive for Junior Motorsports part-time in 2021. And since that point, Josh Berry has been extremely successful in the NASCAR Cup Series. Yes, he hasn't won a race, but he won a lot of Xfinity races with JRM, and I think Carson could have that same success. And he's a younger driver too. Keep in mind, Carson will only be 22 years old next year. So he has a long career ahead of him and a long road ahead of him, but I think it's going to be really fun to see him get that chance and opportunity. And he's going to join a very elite Junior Motorsports group going into 2025. Of course, you have Carson Kvapil driving the 1 car next year. You're going to have Justin Allgaier in the number 7. Sammy Smith most likely in the number 8 next year. So number 9 probably will be the part-time entry going to 2025 unless they move Sammy Smith to the 9, which could certainly be a possibility. But I think that the 9 will be a part-time entry. And then the 88 car, of course, will be driven by Connor Zilisch. I think this is absolutely the best Junior Motorsports combination we've probably seen since the mid-2010s or maybe even a couple of years ago. You, of course, have Carson Kvapil, who is going to be really strong on short tracks. He might struggle on the road courses, but I think on the short tracks and intermediate tracks especially, I think he's going to be super strong. You've got Justin Allgaier, who probably will still be looking for his first ever championship, but probably will make the Final Four in some way and probably get a few wins in 2025. You've got Sammy Smith, who's probably the weakest of the 4 drivers, but Sammy Smith has shown flashes of brilliance throughout the years so far, and he's shown some good pace and speed throughout the entire season. He's a solid driver who I think will get better next year, especially as he gets a little bit older. And then you got Connor Zilisch, the young phenom. In only his first 2 starts, he's finished in the top 5 in both races, got the win in his debut at Watkins Glen, and finished in 4th at Kansas Speedway, and could realistically win another Xfinity race before the end of the season. And I think that you've got at least 3 drivers here who I think are legit championship threats and contenders. I think for sure Carson Kvapil, Connor Zilisch, and of course Justin Allgaier are the 3 drivers I mentioned here who have a really good chance and opportunity to win the championship. It would not shock me or surprise me if all 3 of these guys are in the Final Four, and it would also not surprise me if Junior Motorsports is able to get their first championship, unless of course they win it this year with Sam Mayer, Justin Allgaier at this point, or Sammy Smith. I think there's a good chance they can get it done this year, but I think going into next year, they've got a better chance and opportunity. So realistically for Carson Kvapil, what are my expectations going into 2025? I think Carson Kvapil is going to win at least 2 to 3 races next year. I think he's going to be extremely strong on the short tracks. I think he'll probably end up winning at tracks like Martinsville and Richmond and probably tracks like Phoenix as well early in the year. And I think if he can do that, the sky is the heaven for him. I think he's in a really good position to be competitive unless, of course, Eric Almirola comes back, which we don't know at this point if he is coming back to Xfinity in 2025. But you look at Xfinity, it is going to also have a very stacked rookie class. I mentioned Carson Kvapil. You've got Connor Zilisch. You're going to have Daniel Dye next year. You're going to have Christian Eckes, Nick Sanchez, William Walsh most likely, and Taylor Gray also are going to be in that rookie class most likely next year. You're going to have one of the most stacked rookie classes, and you got Harrison Burton coming back to Xfinity next year. You've obviously got Allgaier back. You've got Austin Hill and Jesse Love driving for RCR. You've got Chandler Smith. We don't know what he's doing at this point. You've got Sam Mayer and Sheldon Creed over the Haas factory team going into next year. And in general, if you're a fan of the Xfinity series right now, you've got to be excited to see what is going on with Xfinity. I'm really excited for next year, and I think Carson is going to do an excellent and fantastic job with Junior Motorsports in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards once again. Now, this past weekend, Carl Edwards was at Kansas Speedway, and I talked about this on the channel a couple days ago, but Carl Edwards at the time said he wasn't really planning to return. Well, yesterday on Actions Detrimental, Denny Hamlin actually revealed that he talked to Carl Edwards at Kansas Speedway. And he said about 1 hour, 3 minutes into the thing, or 1 hour, 2 minutes into his podcast, he says that Denny Hamlin says that 2311 Racing has a car ready for him if Carl Edwards ever gets the itch and opportunity to get behind the wheel once again. Carl said he would do it if NASCAR would go ahead and increase the horsepower. Now, we've seen Carl Edwards back at the racetrack a lot, and I've theorized in the past that Carl Edwards could have a chance and opportunity to drive a 2311 racing car. And if horsepower is the big reason that's holding Carl Edwards back from getting in the sport, that is really, really disappointing in my opinion. And that is one of the other reasons why I think NASCAR needs to increase the horsepower, because you might get the chance and opportunity to see former retired drivers like Carl Edwards and maybe Kurt Busch come out of retirement and race. And I think it'd be pretty cool to see him come back and race in NASCAR. Now, realistically, we know NASCAR has been out there and not been the biggest fan of we're getting the horsepower back in these cars. We know the teams want it. We know the drivers want it. We even know the engine manufacturers like Toyota and Ford and Chevy have all said that they would absolutely be fine with adding horsepower to the next-gen car. But for some reason, NASCAR, for whatever reason, does not want to add horsepower. The big theory is that they're waiting for a new manufacturer to come in. Rumored at one point that Honda was looking to come in, and they were looking to add a hybrid component. And the hybrid and electric component was likely going to add horsepower. Now, since that time, we haven't heard any updates on Honda at this point, and I feel like those talks have probably gone down, especially as of recently. Now, if this is the way we get Carl Edwards back in the sport, I think it'd be pretty awesome to see. But I think the big thing is it's good to see Carl Edwards at least back in the racetrack. Now, do I think he returns in some other capacity if he doesn't get behind the wheel of the race car? I think there's a really good chance of that now, more than ever. The fact that Carl Edwards is coming back to the racetrack a lot more, I think is really going to help that in a pretty major way. One of my theories is if he doesn't get behind the wheel of a race car, maybe comes back in the TV area or works as like an official for a team or moves to a competition side. Maybe goes to 2311 Racing on the competition side of things. Does what like Matt Kenseth's doing over there, what Trevor Bayne is doing currently at the moment. Maybe goes to that kind of side of things. Maybe he goes and works for TV, for example, with Amazon, NBC. We don't know what the lineups are going to be for any of these TV side. And Carl Edwards was very impressive in the TV booth when he did it at Darlington last year. He was really, really good. And I know Clint Boyer was egging Carl to come back at that point, but Carl Edwards at the time wasn't interested in coming back. But I really hope that NASCAR in the future does add horsepower to the next-gen car. If this is the way we can get Carl back in the sport, let's do it, NASCAR, so we can get a guy like Carl Edwards to be back. But if Carl Edwards doesn't decide to come back on the competition side and race, it is what it is. Carl Edwards had a lot of success in NASCAR. 28 career NASCAR Cup Series wins, won the Southern 500, of course, won the Coast 600, both in 2015. He finished runner-up in the championship. Technically in 05, he tied, but Gray Biffle got the tiebreaker because Biffle had more wins. He finished second in 2008, finished second in 2011, and finished second, of course, in 2016. Carl Edwards was a really successful race car driver and, of course, like I said, getting inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And he said this recently, too. He's fallen in love with the sport once again. Carl Edwards had fallen out of the sport, obviously, because Carl Edwards left the sport in 2017. I think everyone's been wanting him to come back to NASCAR over the last couple years because Carl Edwards is basically everyone wants him to come back and drive the next-gen car, come back and close out a chapter, because people do feel like, and I kind of feel like this as well a little bit, that Carl Edwards kind of left the sport on a very, very bad note for some people. Back then, now I think if Carl Edwards would come back, it'd be great to see him come back and do a one-off for a team like 2311, like Mark Truex Jr. is going to be doing next year with 2311 in the Daytona 500, and Cole Pearn's going to be the crew chief. I just want to see Carl Edwards come back for one more time and just finish off his career. If he doesn't want to come back after that, I think it is what it is at this point. I think it'd be cool to see him get that chance and opportunity to drive like a next-gen car once again at this particular moment. But at the same time, if he decides to not come back and race, it is what it is. But I think the fact that you're seeing him more at the racetrack, it tells me we're either getting closer to see him get behind the wheel of a next-gen car or a race car, or we are getting closer to see him move into more of an official capacity. I think the chances of him doing that are becoming higher and higher. We've seen him at least at 3 or 4 races so far this year. Last year he was at Nashville. I think he was at a race earlier this year. He was at Daytona in the spring at the spot at Daytona International Speedway. And I think it's just cool to see him back out of the racetrack. It's kind of like seeing a ghost, for example, for some people, seeing him get back out of the track. And again, I think we all want to see guys come out of retirement and do one-off starts, kind of like do what Dale Jr. is, even though Jr. is not playing the race in 2025 at this point. But for Carl Edwards, I think it'd be pretty amazing to see him get that chance and opportunity to come back and close out a chapter of his career by maybe doing a one-off in the sport. Will it happen? Who knows at this point, but I really would love to see it happen because I think Carl Edwards being in the sport is really, really good for it. Seeing someone come back who hasn't been around as much in the last 5-6 years, especially since he left the sport, seeing him show up a lot more, be on TV, be and doing other things is really fascinating to see. So we'll see what happens if Carl Edwards decides to ever get behind the wheel. Maybe we'll see him drive for 2311. Maybe we'll see him move in the TV booth. Who knows at this point? But we'll see if they decide to add horsepower so Carl Edwards can maybe in the future get the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel of a next-gen car. It'd be pretty exciting and really fun if he got that chance and opportunity, in my honest opinion. So, that is going to be today's Law NASCAR in Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Leave a description below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. You think Carl Edwards is ever going to return or not? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. And how do you think Carson Kvapil is going to do in 25? Let me your thoughts in the comments below. Later today, you'll see the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for this weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. Tomorrow on the channel, you're going to see the NASCAR Cup Series race picks for the Yellowwood 500 and the paint scheme video as well. Then on Friday, you'll see a NASCAR news video, most likely, along with the Truck Series race review, which will take place on Friday night. Then Saturday, you'll see the Xfinity review, the qualifying reactions, and an SVG video, most likely. And same thing goes for Sunday as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. And if there's any major news that breaks this week, we'll discuss here live on the channel. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.